Okay, hey everyone, welcome to this month Visual Builder Office Hours. That's a webcast that we're doing every month. And this month we're going to talk about Visual Builder Studio. We'll give you an overview of Visual Builder Studio, specifically in the context of the features it provides for developers working on Visual Builder applications. My name is Shai Schmelzer. I'm from the product management team for Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. And with me today are also Blaine Carter and Murtaza Amiji. They would both be monitoring the Q&A panel. So if during this session you have any questions, just post them on the Q&A panel that you can see in the Zoom control over there, and they'll be answering it throughout the session. We'll also try and cover any follow-up questions at the end of the session today, if we'll have enough time remaining. So what do we want to cover today? A few things. We want to start by explaining what Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio are, how they relate to each other, a little bit about the history behind them. Then we're going to talk about the specific components that make up Visual Builder Studio and what features they offer Visual Builder developers. Then we'll do a couple of demos during this. We'll start with the demo that just shows you how to get started with Visual Builder Studio, get your application in there. And then we'll go through a quick demo that shows you the full life cycle and what you can do when building Visual Builder applications with Visual Builder Studio. But before we go into today's feature, maybe a little bit of a background just to make sure we're all on the same page. First of all, Visual Builder, hopefully you're all using it. Visual Builder is a development tool, but it's also a platform for hosting your application. So when you spin up an instance of Visual Builder in the cloud, what you get is this box in the middle over here. And the box has two parts to it. It has the design time environment. This is basically the IDE through which you create applications. And it has the server component, which hosts your application, which is basically a bunch of HTML, JavaScript, CSS, JSON files, all are hosted on a web server. There's also a built-in database in Visual Builder that can host your business object, on top of which you can host business objects. So the business object basically exposes the database tables as REST services, provide you a place to write business logic on top of them. This is actually a Java-based layer running in the server. And another part of the server is this REST proxy that allows you to access other services from outside Visual Builder in a secure way, providing authentication, core support, and things like that. So all of this is what you get when you get a Visual Builder environment. So this is something easy. All of you should be familiar with this. Visual Builder has been around for about 6-7 years now. Even before that, we had a product called the Oracle Developer Cloud Service. Okay, and that's actually one of the first products that Oracle offered in the cloud. It was offered as a free entitlement to anyone who had an Oracle Cloud account. And what it provided is a set of features to support team development, managing a development team with issue tracking, agile features, sprint management, things like that. It provided Git-based version management for your code, CI/CD automation, and basically covered the full DevOps cycle. So this was a service that has been around for a while. It was in the Oracle Cloud, and you were able to use it to manage the code and the development and the CI/CD of any artifact that goes into your Oracle Cloud services. One of the things you were able to do is you were able to hook up your Visual Builder instance into the Git repository in Oracle Developer Cloud service and basically manage your application code inside that Git repository. So we had two services on two sides and they were talking to each other. But then we figured out, hey, we might be able to make the experience even smoother if we'll take the part that is the design time from Visual Builder and just bring it into what used to be Developer Cloud Service. We did that, and then we renamed Developer Cloud Service to be Visual Builder Studio. So today in Visual Builder Studio, you get all the Git version management, code review, CI/CD automation, all the team management in terms of tracking tasks, agile, wiki for sharing information, and you also get the Visual IDE for developing Visual Builder application. Now, Visual Builder Studio itself is just a development, but at the end of the day, you need to deploy the application, and the deployment would be onto the Visual Builder runtime. Okay, so this is still the same server you had before with the app hosting, business object, data, database, and the REST proxy. And from Visual Builder Studio, you'll take your artifacts, you'll use CI/CD to deploy them to this server. This server, again, can be either a standalone Visual Builder or can be an Oracle integration instance. Okay. In both cases, you would still use the same Visual Builder Studio. And again, the Visual Builder Studio part, this part, is something that you get for free. It's not something that you license from Oracle. The minute that you have an instance of Visual Builder, for example, or an instance of Oracle integration, you're entitled to spin up Visual Builder Studio. The same Visual Builder Studio can also be used to deploy applications as app extensions onto the Fusion apps runtime. Okay, so if you've been here for the past couple of office hours, we talked a lot about building extensions to Oracle Fusion apps using App UI extensions. And you do it from the same environment with the same tools, and you deploy it instead of to Visual Builder directly into the Fusion apps. So at the end of the day, the goal is for you as a development team to work with Visual Builder Studio, deploy your application to the infrastructure, and then your customers use the devices to access the running application. So that's the relationship between the two. Okay. Together, they make up what we call the Visual Builder platform and give you not just a rapid way to create, extend, and host your enterprise application. It also gives you all the development infrastructure behind it to manage your development team, to do collaborative development, to version control your source, and continuously deliver your application in an automated way. The two parts are Visual Builder Studio, which is basically the design and the DevOps platform, which is available for free, and the VB runtime, which is basically the server, which is the license that you buy from Oracle. Okay. So what features do Visual Builder Studio, what benefit it gives to someone who's currently using Visual Builder? So as you probably know, you can actually do the design time in Visual Builder itself. What's the benefit of doing the design time from the design time that is inside Visual Builder Studio? So several things. One of the key things is a much deeper Git integration. So integration with version management, with all the functionality that you need, more Git operations, whether it's stashing or cherry picking or comparing files or things like that. It's a much deeper integration, allows you to leverage the Git functionality to its full capabilities. The other aspect is we also added into the IDE inside Visual Builder Studio a Git panel that helps you track the specific files that were changed, shows you exactly what is happening in your code. We also added the ability to do code conflict resolution. So in cases where multiple developers are working on the application, two people change the same code base at the same time, you can visually see what were the changes and adopt the correct change and make decisions in a more meaningful way. It, of course, allows you to do the whole continuous integration and continuous deployment, basically taking your application, running, for example, tests on it, running audits on it, and then automating the deployment of the application to your various instances. And beyond that, you can decide that you also want to use Visual Builder Studio to manage the whole team development experience. This would mean having a system that allows you to track all your issues, all your to-do, all your bugs, all the features that you want to build, allow you to prioritize them, assign them to different members of your organization. Okay? It would also allow you to manage agile dashboards, whether it's using Scrum or Kanban format to look at what your team is actually doing, having an insight into your sprint planning, taking items from your backlog, assigning them to a specific sprint of development, tracking the progress of the sprint, tracking who's doing what, things like that. And also a wiki where you can share all the information that your team needs to share, whether it's design documents, best practices, discussion on features, things like that. So if you adopt Visual Builder Studio, you'll get all of those capabilities in addition to what you already have in Visual Builder. And again, you get it for free. Okay. How do you get Visual Builder Studio? If you don't have an instance already spun up, you can just go into the Oracle Cloud Console under Developer Services, you will find the Visual Builder Studio. This is actually something relatively new. In the last month, we actually made Visual Builder Studio an OCI native service. It's what we call a Gen 2 service, and you can go over and spin it up from there. If you already have Visual Builder Studio from before that, maybe you already spun it up in your instance, maybe it was used by other services inside Oracle, you might find it under the OCI classic services. It's going to be called still developer in the menu over there. If you don't have one, just go over and spin up an instance right now. Again, when you spin up an instance, there's no charges on that occurring into your account, so you're free to do it. One aspect to know, usually you just need one instance of Visual Builder Studio for your whole tenancy, because in that instance, you can access services everywhere in your tenancy. However, with the new OCI native Visual Builder Studio, you can now spin up instances for each region. So you can have more than one Visual Builder Studio instance, one per region, allowing you to have an instance that is closer to your development team if you want to. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the components of Visual Builder Studio, and we'll start with something called the project. But before we'll do that, I'm actually going to switch for a second into my browser to show you the Visual Builder Studio environment. This is where you're going to get to the first time that you go into Visual Builder Studio. The first time this list is going to be empty, and you're going to have an option there to create a project. If there are already projects, you're just going to see here a list of all the projects that you have access to as a developer, okay? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new project, okay? And we're going to call this one the TV project, okay? For VB, and this is going to be a TV app project. Okay? The next step is to choose a template. Now, in some of your instances, you would actually see a template here for visual application, as well as a template for application extension. Some other instances, depending on the region you're in, you might not see this template. So I'm going to behave as though I don't have this template. I'm going to create an empty project, just to show you that the template adds a few things, but you can easily achieve the same thing without using the template. Okay, and then you can choose the markup language for your wiki. I'm going to stick with the Confluence syntax and click finish. What we're doing now is actually going over and starting to create the project, provisioning everything that the project provides. And this is going to take about 2-3 minutes. So while this is running, we're going to go over what is happening. So a project is basically the place where a development team is going to collaborate on a specific set of tasks. Usually, a project would map to a development team. Okay, a project would have one what we call activity stream. So this is kind of the news feed that you can see here about what is happening in our project. Okay, so again, think about it as my development team needs to know about every activity that someone else in the development team is doing. That project is also have a single issue tracking system. So again, think about an issue tracking system is kind of like Bugzilla or Jira, things like that, where you basically list all the things that the team needs to do. So you're going to get one of those. Okay, you can of course break it into like components and things like that, associate issues with specific components in your project, assign them to specific people, but it's a shared repository of all those issues. Everyone has the ability to see all those issues. We are also going to get one wiki where you can create multiple pages, of course, multiple directories, but it's again shared among that development team. Inside the project, however, you can have more than one application. Okay, each application, each Visual Builder application is going to be mapped to one Git repository, but you can have more than one application managed inside a project. So the structure here is up to you. You can, of course, also have one or more environments. So environments is basically a mapping to a VB instance where the application is going to be deployed to. And you can, for example, in one project, have a dev instance, a test instance, and 2 production instances in different places around the world, for example. Okay. At the project level, you also manage the team members. Okay, so this is where you can decide who gets access to the code, who can do manipulation of the code, who can assign issues in the issue tracking, who can execute build jobs to, for example, package the application and deploy it or run tests or things like that. So all of this is done inside a project. And what we're doing right now in the backend, we just finished it. The project was created. We got into the new TV project for VB. And as you can see, right now we don't even have a Git repository inside our team. It's just me right now. So the first thing that people usually do is they add team members. Okay, team members can have different roles. I'm not gonna explain all the roles right now, but this is one way for you, for example, to decide who can have access to the code, who can just look at items, things like that. And you can add team members over here to your project. So I'm gonna add a couple of people. For example, I can add Blaine and mark him as a developer limited, which means he has ability to change the code, but maybe not run the build jobs. Jeff, for example, is a regular developer, and this is how you add people. Now, by the way, I added people one by one. You can also add using IDCS groups to add groups of people over, okay? The other thing that you would want to have in your project is an environment. Okay, so environment, you can see over here, there's an environment section. I'm going to create an environment. We're going to create our dev environment for developing, and that would be mapped to one of our Visual Builder instances, okay? I'm just going to need to add an instance. There are multiple ways to add an instance. The first way is for us for Visual Builder Studio to just look at your tenancy and recognize different Visual Builder or Oracle integration instances that are available over here. And then you can pick up the one that you want to use as your development platform and add it over here, okay? Another way to add an instance is let's create, for example, another environment. Let's create our production environment, for example. Okay. In the production environment, again, I can add another VB instance from the same environment. I can also add an instance using the credentials of it. So all I need to provide here is a URL. So let me pick up the URL over here. Okay, pick up this one. That's another VB instance. I'm going to give it the credentials for logging in. And click add. So this would add another instance in a different tenancy, by the way, okay, which, as you can see, is available for me. And this would be my production instance. Okay, so we have two environments right now. Each one of them points to a different runtime server. Okay, so if we're going back over here, this is exactly what we covered today. In environments, you can add multiple environments, map them to a VB instance, an Oracle integration cloud instance, a Fusion app instance. By the way, in there, you can also add, for example, a mapping to a database. So you can do operations on a database. This is very useful for Visual Builder developers. If, for example, you're using the ability to build business object on an external database and you want to manage the database object, run SQL scripts on them, maybe use something like Liquibase to manage the table lifecycle, you can do it from Visual Builder Studio as well. From the environments, you can check the status of the environment, see if it's up and running, see if it's down. Basically gives you an insight into, okay, maybe an environment is right now under maintenance or things like that. And from here, you can also define things like the backends and the certificates that are loaded into your VB instances. You can also see all the deployments on this server and do various operations on the deployments. Everything is basically available from here. Okay, so you can see the status. You can do a refresh of the status. Okay, you can see the certificates and upload certificates over here. And once you start doing deployments on this instance, you would also see deployments over here. Right now, we just added the instance. We didn't do any deployment from Visual Builder Studio, so we don't see anything. All right. The next thing that you would leverage inside Visual Builder Studio is the Git repositories. So this is proper Git, just like any other Git repository. You can access it and store in it anything, any file that you want. You can access it from any Git command line. Those are free Git repositories hosted in the Oracle Cloud for you. Okay, you get a lot of space allocated for you by default to do that and assign files into it. And again, you can store there anything you want. We're going to store there, of course, our Visual Builder application and the artifacts. One of the things you get there is you can then track the whole history of your project, branches, mergers, things like that. You get a view of all the files. You can actually access the files directly. And then beyond the Git repository, you also get the ability to work with workspaces. So workspace is basically taking your central Git and making your own clone, basically as though you would make it on your own machine, but it's not on your own machine, it's still in the cloud, but it's your private copy of the code of the application. Okay, so you create your own copy based on a branch. It's mapped to an environment, one of the environments we defined before. And it's kind of your local copy of the code where you can do changes without affecting what other people see. Okay, so this is kind of your own copy. Other people, other developers can clone the same Git branch. They see their own copy and you don't mess with each other copy. Okay. Once you create a workspace, you actually open the code inside the same visual editor that you're used to. You're not going to work at the code level usually, you're going to work with the visual environment. Okay. And the basic steps that you're going to do with the Git is, as a team, your Git repository, you have like a main line of code. It might not be the main branch, it might be another branch, it might be a release branch or something like that. It's called the default branch. In this example, we're going to use the main branch. This is kind of the core version of our code. When you want to do changes to the code, you create a branch of the code. Okay, inside this branch, you're going to create a workspace out of this branch. Okay, this is your own copy of the branch. You do the changes over there in a workspace. Then you're going to push those changes back into this shared branch so other people can see the same branch. Once the branch is ready to be deployed, you're going to take the artifact from the branch, merge them into the main branch, and then the main branch is usually what you're going to deploy as the application that is ready for production. Okay. Usually the step of taking the changes from a branch and bringing them back into the main branch is done through what we call a merge request. Other people call it a pull request. That's basically a stage where people can look at the changes you do, review them, and approve them before they get merged into the main branch. And we're going to run through all of those steps in a demo in a few minutes. Okay. So one of the things you're going to get in a workspace is better Git integration. So maybe a good step now would be to, again, go over to our project, okay? And let's create a workspace, okay? So right now we don't have any Git repositories. We also don't have any workspaces in our project. So the first time that you're going to get here, it's going to offer you to create a new workspace. Now, if you're starting from scratch, if you're just starting development, you can go over here and say, hey, I need to create a new visual application or potentially create a new application extension. If you already have an application that you created in regular Visual Builder, you can just export the application using the application menu. There's an export option. And then from here, you can do an import. Okay. Also, if you have the application in some other Git repository, you can clone it from there. I'm going to do an import. I'm just going to pick up a file from my hard drive of an exported application and click open. I need to give it a name. So we'll call it the TV shows. That's the name of the workspace. That's my own copy. Okay. And I need to associate it with an environment. Okay. Environment is a Visual Builder instance. I'm going to start by working on the development environment that I have access to. And then I'm going to also create the Git repository for this. So I'm going to create a TV shows Git repository, and I'm going to create branch 1, which is the initial branch where I'm going to work on changes. And then I'm going to click import. Okay, so this takes my zip code, okay, my zip file. It creates a Git repository and imports the zip file into the Git repository. Basically, my application would now be inside the Git repository. It also is going to create a branch called branch 1 out of this Git repository. And it's also going to create the build jobs and pipeline that will enable me to take the code from the Git repository and deploy it onto my environment that I defined. After it's doing all of this, it's going to open the workspace. Now, what you're going to see right now is basically my code in a workspace. So that's my own private copy of the code, and it's going to be just like any other project in Visual Builder. I'm going to get the visual editor. I'm having a bit of difficulties with the network speed here. I'm going to stop my video for now, see if this would improve performance here. Do a quick refresh here. Yeah. In the meantime, I can also show you, this is the view for Jeff. Jeff is another developer in our project. He is accessing the same Visual Builder Studio. He has a different list of projects. Those are the projects that he has access to. And if he does a refresh over here, he would see the list of projects he is allowed to access, including the new TV project VB. You can see the 3 developers that are involved here. He can go into here, and when he goes in here, okay, let me just do a refresh. Yeah, I think I have a bit of a network issue right now. There we go. We can see the 2 environments, the dev and the production. At this stage, if he goes into the Git repository, let me see if I can fix my network issue here. Sorry for that. Yeah, okay, there we go. We're back online. So he can see the Git repository with the application already here. Okay. In fact, he can see we have a branch 1, and he can see the main branch as well. So at this stage, he can go over and he can create his own version, his own workspace from this Git repository. I'm going to switch over back to working as Shai. I opened my application over here and I can start to work on it. Okay, just like you would do in every other application, I can open the design time and work and make changes in my application. Okay. So the first thing that you might want to do once you import an application from Visual Builder into here, for example, you can see by type here, everything is just working. This is our design time. The first thing you might want to do is go into the application setting. There are 2 things you need to do in order to properly work from Visual Builder Studio compared to regular Visual Builder on your application. One of them is to define a version for your application. Again, this would be a numeric version. I'm going to call this version 1. Okay. And the other thing is you want to set a root URL. The root URL is going to be the specific URL that is going to be used in the URL, the specific name of the application that is going to be used in the URL for this application. We're going to call it TV shows VB, for example. Okay. Once I did those 2 changes, I can actually see where those, I did them declaratively. Over here, I have the Git tab. Okay. And in the Git tab, I'll be able to see which file has those changes. Okay, those are changes that goes into the Visual Application JSON file. And once I did those changes, I can also commit them. Commit is saving them locally in my own copy. Okay, changed version and root URL. Okay, commit. So this is simply me doing changes, keeping them in my own local copy. Other developers would not see those changes. Another thing that I can see I need to do now is upgrade to a new version of the VB runtime. So I can click the upgrade. Okay, we'll upgrade to 2304, which is the latest version. Close. And again, you can see over here in the Git tab, the 2 places where those changes happened. Okay, one change is in the Visual Application. You can see 2304 now. okay, and a new version of Jet. The other one is in the package JSON. Maybe you don't initially see what has changed here. So the nice thing here is inside Visual Builder Studio, you can compare to head, and you can compare the current changes to what was in our previous version. Okay, so you can see our current version is 2304 here, and previously we had 2301. So again, this little area, the Git tab, is one of the new features that you get in Visual Builder Studio. Gives you a lot more insight into working with working with Visual Builder and working with Git in there. Okay. Now that we did all of those changes, we can commit the second change. Okay. Now, by the way, at this stage, Jeff, if he would go into branch 1, he's not going to see any of those changes. He's only going to see those when I'm going to press the push operation. Okay, push operation would actually take those changes and would push them from my local copy into the remote copy that is the branch 1 that is shared with Jeff. Okay, so I'm pushing those changes over there. Now, if at this stage I also want to take those changes and deploy them, I can actually click the publish. Okay. And publish would take those changes and will push them, okay, and deploy them onto our development environment. Okay, so it would publish my changes to the dev environment. Usually you would do a merge after review. This is what we recommend. Just for now, I'm going to do the merge now without reviewing those changes. I'm going to push them. I need to provide credentials for accessing my VB instance, so the application can be deployed there, and it's going to take my changes, going to commit them into branch 1, fetch what is in main, compare them to my branch 1, merge the two together, okay? Merge my changes from branch 1 into the main line of code, push it into there, and this would fire up a pipeline that would build my application, okay? So if we go back now into my project, over here, you would see in our build area, we now have a build inside the queue, okay, that is waiting to be executed as we speak. So let's go back to the slide just to cover some of the things we talked about, okay? We showed you the better Git integration. I showed you the Git tab. I didn't show you all the commands that you get here, but again, a lot of the more deep Git integration commands are now available from the menu in Visual Builder Studio. Okay. I didn't show you a merge request creation, but we're going to show you that next. But this is basically the ability to take changes that you do in a clone or in a branch and merge them into the main line of branch, including adding reviewers, adding pointer to issues, things like that. We're going to show you that in a minute. And we're also going to show you conflict resolution. So that's the ability to basically go over changes that two people did to the same file at the same time and compare and decide what you're going to adopt from those changes in case there are conflicts there. Okay. So we just showed you how to import an application into Visual Builder Studio, and the next step is we committed it, and then we're running the application lifecycle. So a few things. When you're working in a workspace, so this again, this is executing the pipeline right now. I'm going to go back to my workspace. Now, by the way, one of the things to know, you can right click here and say open the workspace in a new tab. This way you have the view of your projects over here, and the workspace is something you can see over here in the visual editor. So while you're working, you don't need to deploy it if you just want to run the application and see how it behaves. You can just click the preview button. Preview button basically takes your application, runs it, and you're able to interact with it just like you do in regular VB, right? So the interaction here is, for example, if you type a different search criteria, you get another set of TV shows, and you can get the information about them. Okay. So this is the preview. This is basically me as a developer running my own local copy. Now, in some cases, I might want to have other developers be able to look at what the changes I did and review them. In regular VB, that was the stage step. In Visual Builder Studio, this would be the share application scenario. And when I click share, I'll get a URL to my application. And this would basically take my application, do a deployment, and then this URL I can give to other people in my team, and they would be able to access my own copy before I submitted the changes into the shared Git and review my application. Okay, so this is the share button. Beyond the review and the share, the next step is a deploy. And a deploy is basically taking your application and physically deploying it on a VB instance, where we have two options which are mapped to what used to be called as stage and live mode in regular VB. Stage is when you deploy the application with a version number. Okay, and that's actually what I'm doing right now with the application with the changes I did there. I'm deploying it with the pipeline with a version number at the top. Because there's a version number there, you can have multiple deployments of various versions of the application out there, all with different version numbers. Okay, this is used again for testing, and if I want multiple testing for multiple people outside of my project, for example. Okay. You can also do a deployment of a live application. A live application doesn't have a version in the URL, therefore the URL is a fixed URL. When you deploy a new version, it's just overwriting the existing one. Okay, and that's the single live instance of your application that you deploy to. Okay. And again, what controls the version is this version field that we set in the application setting. And what controls the URL that we're using is this root URL that we were setting over here again in the settings. Okay. In order to do the actual deployment, either with a version or without a version, we use build job and CI/CD automation. So continuous integration, continuous delivery. This is what Visual Builder Studio is very good at. It basically takes code from the Git repository and deploys it to various environments. And we made it very easy for you to do the deployment because we have built-in steps for managing a visual application. Okay, we have steps that package and optimize the application. We have steps that do an Oracle deployment. And we also have steps that do things like run an audit on your application to give you the results of the code audit, run automated tests on your application using the action chain tests and getting you the results of that, as well as working with the data and importing and exporting data into business objects, locking and unlocking the application, as well as the ability to roll back and undeploy an application. So all of those are steps that are defined there. You create build jobs with those steps, okay? And then you orchestrate those build jobs and the order that they execute using a pipeline, which is kind of a diagram that indicates what build job is executed after each other build job, okay? And one of the nice things is when you create a workspace initially, like I created before that, we create all of those for you. We create the build jobs, we create the pipeline, everything is ready for you to use. So for example, in the project I just worked on, I didn't need to create any of those artifacts, okay? So let's jump back into our project, okay? And we would look at the build jobs. You can see the package just finished. We don't have anything further. We have a pipeline. The pipeline is in green, which means that it ran successfully. If we actually look at the pipeline over here and the layout, you would see that we have two jobs here. The first one is TV show package. The other one is TV show deploy. Okay, and right now, those jobs ran successfully. We can see how long it took. We can also view the log. We can see both of them finished successfully. Okay. Let's look at each one of those jobs in detail. So the first one is the job package, the TV show package. Okay, and if we look at the configuration here, you would see that what Visual Builder created is a connection to our Git repository with the automatic invocation of this job every time that we do changes on the main branch. So every time that someone changes something on main, we execute this job. This job then takes the step that is called Visual Application Package. Okay, it's one of the steps available under the visual application here. It's called package. This also includes the optimization of the application, which is very important if you're going to deploy live applications. Optimization makes your application run faster. It reduces the amount of artifacts that you need to download, makes the loading of your application a lot faster. So this is a good step to have here. After this step, in the after build, we're going to generate a zip file. So these steps actually generate a zip file. You can actually control the name of the zip file if you want to. I'm just using the default. And then we're archiving it for use later. So this is what this job did. In the artifacts, you would see we have a zip file of our built application. Okay? And this is what the next build job is going to do. So the next build job is deploy. The deploy build job, if we look at the configuration of it, before the build starts, picks up the artifact. It copies the artifact from the package, so the zip file, and then it uses a deployment step connecting to our dev environment in this case, and deploying this zip file. And you can see that we're deploying it with a version number in the URL. Okay, so this basically takes my application and deploys it. If we look at the log for this build job, okay, we would actually see the URL to the application that was deployed over here. Okay, now you don't need to look at this from here. You can actually go to your environments, okay, look at your development environments and look at the deployments. And we can see two deployments right now. One is my shared application. Remember, I did for my application from Workspace, I did share. The other one is the deployed over here. And if I expand the deployment, I would see the link. I can go over here and access my application. Okay. You can see there is a version number right here in the URL. Okay. And that's basically my staged application over here. All right, so we saw how the build automation works. At this point, I should mention that if your application involves business object, there's also specific things you need to do with business object. The first thing is you need to whitelist the Visual Builder Studio on your Visual Builder instance allowed origins. That's in order to prevent cause issues from Visual Builder Studio into your Visual Builder instance. And then what you need to realize is because each workspace is your own copy of the application, okay, it also has its own copy of the business objects. So initially those are going to be empty unless the business object is marked as containing setup data. This means that once you create a workspace with business object, it's very likely that you would need to import data into this business object. That's very easy to do through the data manager in the workspace. Also, when you deploy the application, there's an option there to say, hey, do I want to create a clean database or do I want to keep the existing data in a database? Again, the first time that you do a deployment, it's going to create the database with the tables with no data in there. Okay, so you would need to also import data into that database, but subsequent deployment, you can keep the existing database with the existing data. It's similar to how the lifecycle works from Visual Builder in terms of the ability when you create business object to keep existing data or use the data or create a clean database. Okay, so to do those things, there's an export and import of data steps in the build jobs, and there's also lock and unlock options to lock the application, because if you want to import data into a running application, you first need to lock it and then import the data and then unlock it. We have a blog entry that shows you those step-by-steps. We don't have time today to cover it, but you can look at the blog entry and there's a video there, there's instructions, and we'll show you how to do that. Okay. So beyond those features, another thing that Visual Builder Studio gives you is the ability to do project management. Okay, so we have an issue tracking system, we have agile dashboard, we have sprint planning, we have wiki. Again, we don't have time today to go into all of those in a lot of details, but I wanted to show you some of those and cover kind of the full development lifecycle of an application. Okay, so let's take a scenario where this application already exists. Again, this is a URL to a running application, which also means that if I go here over as Jeff, which is another developer, and he accesses the same URL, he would see the same application. Okay, and maybe he can see an issue with the application. For example, we can say, hey, this default value here, we don't want it to be team because it shows us the A team. This is an old show. What everyone is talking about today is a show called The Last of Us. So we want the default value here to be last. Okay, so this is a new feature we want to introduce into our application. So Jeff working over here can go into our issue tracking system, okay, and can document this issue. So we're going to create an issue, change default search, okay, switch to use last instead. Okay, we can indicate whether this is a bug or a new feature or a task. We can also work with epics and stories. We can set severity, priority. We can also say, hey, who is this assigned to? So I'm going to assign this to Shai. I can say when is it due, so maybe it's due on this date. I can also estimate how long it's going to take and even give it agile points. Okay, and then I can create an issue, and this is going into our issue tracking system. Okay, and again, this issue tracking system is shared among all our team. Okay, so this is feature number 1 in our issue. We can also have other issues here. For example, maybe we have another issue here. Change page title, need to say TV searching engine. Okay, we can assign this, for example, to someone else, maybe Jeff. Okay. And create issue, and this is defect number 2, for example. Okay, all of those issues are inside our issue tracking system, logged over here. And again, you can have multiple of those. You can do all sorts of advanced searches and queries on them. Each user, for example, can see the issues that are opened for him. For example, if I'm here logged in as Shai and I go into our issue tracking system, I can see the open issues, all the open issues, and I can also see only the issues that are assigned to me, which is this issue number 1 over here, which requires me to change the default search. Okay. What I'm going to do is, as a developer inside my workspace over here, I get here a notification about all the jobs that finished before that. I'm going to create a new branch. Okay, I'm going to create the feature 1 branch. Sorry, new branch here. We're going to call this one the feature 1 branch. Okay, and I'm going to create it from the main line of code. Okay, I don't need to remember this. So now I'm working in my own copy, in my own branch. One of the things you usually want to do is you want to pull in the latest versions of the code from the remote branch. Okay, so I'm gonna pick up the main branch over here and pull the changes over here, so I would have whatever is the latest. Okay. And now I'm going to work on the changes I need to do. For example, I can go over here to my field. I see that this field comes from a variable. I can go to my variable and I can change this variable, instead of saying team to saying last. So this would be my fix. Okay, I'm gonna commit the changes. This is a fix to for issue 1. Okay, that's my changes. Again, those changes are local to me. Okay, in parallel, I can also, at this point of time, do a push of those changes into my new branch, or basically take those changes and the branch I created, the feature 1 branch, and push it to create this branch in our shared Git repository. Once I do this, if I now again switch over to work as Jeff, Jeff can go over to the Git repository and he should be able to see feature 1 branch, okay? And he can see where the changes were made. For example, over here, he can see the exact changes I did in my code. Okay. Now, one of the things that people might do by mistake is they might actually go and change things directly without creating new branches and stuff like that. So let's say I'm again working as Jeff over here. I'm going to go over to my flows and go into the search page, and I'm going to change the title of the page. So we have the page. In the page, we have the HTML over here, and I can also do changes directly over here. So I think the change I want to do, if we go here in the page designer, there should be somewhere where it says TV shows. So we can do an edit here, find where it says TV shows, sorry, shows. It's not here. No, it might be in a variable. Let me see just to make sure. This is yeah, it is here. It's a page title. Right. Do I see it here? Yeah, it might be in a variable. Okay, we'll skip this change. I'll show you another change. So let's say, for example, Jeff went in here and did a change, for example, for a variable. Am I looking at the right thing? Yeah, search pages, search TV. Yeah, you should have here now the last. Right. All right. Sorry for the little confusion. I'm looking for a variable called search string. Okay, so we can do it in another way. We can go over back to the Git repository here, and we can actually search for the variable. So search string. Okay, there we go. We can find the exact location of the variable over here. Okay, and I can go over here, for example, into this file and make a change directly here. So, for example, maybe he went in and updated it to be last with a lowercase l, okay, and commit the changes. Okay, so this is a change that Jeff did. And in the meantime, I'm over here doing other changes. For example, I go over here and you say, hey, you know what, there's this new very cool show. Everyone is talking about it. I want to, instead of calling it last, I'm going to call it us. Okay, so this is the changes I do in my copy of the code. Okay, now if I'm going to, at this point of time, try and save those changes, I'm going to commit it locally. This would work okay. Okay, because this is a change to us. This is a chain that I'm doing in my local copy. But the minute that I would try and actually publish this, okay, to actually push it into our shared repository and execute the build jobs to do the changes, okay, I'm going to do a review here, fix for issue 1. Okay, I'm going to have Jeff review my code, and I'm going to have myself as a reviewer. I'm going to link it to my issue 1, because this is the issue that I'm fixing. And again, notice how nicely we have everything tied together, everything. We can see that the push failed because there are letter commits. Okay, someone already did changes. Before I can push, I need to actually bring in the changes that someone else did. So I'm going to do a pull request, bring in the changes from this remote branch feature 1, pull the changes. And when I pull those changes, what I'm going to see is that there's going to be a conflict. Okay, there's a conflict in one of the files because I did changes and Jeff did changes. I can actually use my conflict resolution here to see the 2 changes. Okay, I can decide if I want to use my version or use their version. I'm going to use my version, have it set to us. I'm going to mark it as resolve and close, and then I'm going to continue the pull, and we resolve the conflict. Now we can go over and do the publish again. This would take my changes, push them into the repository. Okay. I'm going to get Jeff to review my code. I'm going to add myself as a reviewer, link it to issue 1, publish the changes. This now creates a merge request where we can all review the code changes. Okay, so let's look at it again now from the view of Jeff. Okay, Jeff is going to get a merge request over here. In the merge request, he can go in. He can see who requested the change, what is the issue that this relates to. He can click on it and see the actual issue. Okay. He can then go back into the merge request. He can see the exact changed file and what changes were made. This is, for example, us. He can give me a comment. Okay. I can then review his comment. If he's okay with the code, by the way, he can click approve and say this is approved in terms of changes. I can go as a developer in my project, look at the same merge request, see the whole discussion, see the feedback from Jeff. So we have this code review going on here. I can see the comment he gave me on this line just now. Okay, I can reply to his comment. I can also approve the changes. So right now it's just Jeff. If I click approve, both of us approve those changes, and then we can merge them into the main branch. Okay. So this is now going to take those changes, bring them into main, change the code in the main branch. And this, of course, is going to fire up our pipeline. Okay, so you can see a job got put into our queue. It's going to take those changes and run through the process of deploying them to our running application, basically overriding our application. Now, I can also, for example, add another build job. Okay, which can be a deploy production. Okay, and I can copy the existing deploy job. And I'm going to change one thing in this job. Instead of deploying over here to my dev instance, which is what the initial thing is doing, I'm going to deploy to my production instance. So deploying to a different instance of Visual Builder. I'm going to deploy it without a version number, okay, and click save. Right? I can then bring this job into my pipeline. So we have this pipeline running right now. I can configure the pipeline, and I can, after this package job, I can add another success job, and we'll take the deploy job to production. Okay, so after we package, we do 2 deployments now. We do a deployment to the stage, basically, and we also do a deployment to another environment to production. And let's look at the log here. Okay, this build job is running right now. So we should still have, okay, the package is happening right now. Hopefully it would then fire up the 2 build jobs to do the deployment. And that's how I can deploy across environment my changes. Okay. Kind of running out of time, so I'm going to let this run for a second. Do a quick summary. What Visual Builder Studio gives you is a better development experience, especially if you're developing with more than one developer in your team. Okay, this is critical in those cases to prevent one developer overriding the changes of another. It makes the whole development process much more organized. Properly work with Git integration gives you a much deeper integration with Git, allowing you to roll back changes if you did some mistake, for example, allow you to track changes and who did what in your project. It also enables you to manage the deployment and deploy across multiple environments and multiple instances, the same application from one source. You have one source of truth deployed across multiple places without the need to do export import from one environment to another manually. Okay. It also enables you to do all the agile development process, track your issues, manage your sprints, and all of this is free. It's a free entitlement that is part of what you already have in Oracle Cloud. So we highly recommend that you uptake Visual Builder Studio as the way that you build Visual Builder application. Okay. One thing to note, if you're developing with Visual Builder Studio, don't mix and match. Don't then go into the Visual Builder design time. Do all your development from Visual Builder Studio. It's much more organized. You get all the artifacts from there, much more capabilities. Your Visual Builder runtime then becomes just your runtime instance, okay? If you want to learn more about Visual Builder Studio, we have a lot of videos on YouTube. We actually have a playlist for Visual Builder Studio on there. So you can search for Visual Builder Studio on YouTube to see those. We have, of course, our documentation. There's a full set of documentation for Visual Builder Studio, including step-by-step tutorials to teach you how to use it. There's a lot of entries about Visual Builder Studio in our blog at blogs.oracle.com/VBCS. Our Cloud Customer Connect forum has a forum for Visual Builder Studio. If you have any questions, you can post them there. And of course, our LinkedIn group, the Visual Builder group. If you're not part of it already, you should join us over there. We post about every new feature, new release, new blog entries, and share information among everyone that is using Visual Builder. All right, let's see what's happening right now in my project. This is still, okay, we finished the job for this one. Our pipeline right now, let's see what's the status. Yeah, we're running the second pipeline. It finished. Let's look at the at this one. Okay. Okay, this ran only the first deployment, so we can manually run the second deployment now, or we can run the whole pipeline again, but to shorten it, I'm going to also run the production deployment. In the meantime, I'm going to show you that the instance that Jeff was looking in, okay, this application over here, okay, if I now do a refresh of the application, the default value is going to be, oh, sorry, that's it's a session variable, so it's going to keep it over here. But if I'm going to do new private window, place it over here, okay, the default value is us. Okay, so we got the changes deployed into our application automatically. We can see it from here. We're running the deploy production job right now. So once this is finished, we should also have it in our production environment. Inside our dev environment now, you would see, again, the deployment of version 1 that is in here. If we switch to our production environment, let's see what's the status of our build job. It finished. So in the production environment now, we can look at the deployment. We can see the application deployed over here. This is a different instance of Visual Builder, so I might actually need to log in order to access it. No, this is anonymous application. Okay, so all of you should probably be able to access it. You can see this is the live version of the application, no version in the URL. The changes are already here, and we have our production instance also running our application. So this was very quickly an overview of Visual Builder. There's a lot in there to learn about Visual Builder Studio. Hopefully this gives you some insight into the functionality that we provide. I see there were some questions that were answered during the session. Okay, I see all of them got answered. So we would finish today. Again, if you have any further questions, please visit our forum on Cloud Customer Connect. You can also access it from the help menu inside Visual Builder Studio itself. If you go over to your workspace, there's an access to our discussion forum from here, so you can ask any further question. Thanks everyone for attending today, and have a great day.